Hi, this is Melanie. I'm going to talk about the takeaways I had from this week's readings, week 2. The first chapter I'm going to talk about is chapter 3 from the Baughman text. That chapter is about auditions. I had 3 big takeaways from that. The first one is the quote, "The audition is your way of seeing how a child might perform in a given role, and to some extent how dedicated the child will be to the production." In my very limited experience I have, last year I produced my first play in middle school, and so that was something that I learned right away, that if they're not serious about the audition, they're not going to be serious about the performance. And so I kind of learned that the hard way. My second takeaway was this from the section on casting. And I had never thought about the idea of casting upperclassmen in the major roles, just because I've never had to do it before. Like this, I'm still new. So that was interesting for me. In middle school, we have 7th and 8th grade at my school. So my character roles this year that are major are cast by my actors that were in my play last year, and that just happened because they just have more experience and know what to do, and they presented a much better audition than the 7th graders. But I think going forward, hopefully when I move to high school, that will be something I will have to remember. And then my third takeaway from that chapter was about managing the fallout with auditions. So I found that very helpful information. The advice about giving constructive feedback and sympathizing with their feelings. I understand that is something that I definitely need to do. And I just try to make them all know from the beginning that if they don't get a role, they are still going to be needed. And they might end up getting a role if somebody quits or gets cut. So in my position where I am right now, I tell them, you never know, you might end up with a role even though you don't get one from the beginning. So next I'm going to move on to chapter 10 in the Catron book. Chapter 10 was about the prompt book, and this was very overwhelming for me, but I definitely can see the importance of having the prompt book. My productions are very small scale, so I definitely don't feel the need to go into all the details that the prompt book needs to have. However, a lot of the things I do have. I do have a prompt book. I was just calling it my binder, but I guess it's a prompt book, and I do put things in there that I need, and it just helps me stay organized, and so I can see how moving forward, hopefully if I do move up to high school or beyond, that's something I definitely will use. The second takeaway from that chapter was about the script and how detailed the author was about what that script should look like, and how to cut it and paste it and put it in there and what it should look like. So it was very detailed, and I do appreciate that. Because again, being brand new, I really don't know what I'm doing most of the time. And then my third takeaway was the section about, including information about the playwright. I had no idea that was something that I should do. So that was very enlightening to me. And I will definitely think about that also in the future. Chapter 11 was about auditions. And I found it interesting that some of the advice in this book differed from the advice in the other book, but it's just different, authors' opinions. So I felt this section about priority considerations to be very helpful. Those 14 guidelines about how to ensure successful auditions was great because, again, I don't know what I'm doing. And so being brand new, I really appreciate that. Second takeaway for me from that chapter was about the different types of auditions. Again, I didn't know there were so many types of auditions, and so I just learned so much from the readings this week. And I think for my current setting that the general open auditions are the best, because I do feel like the kids learn from each other when they're able to see each other audition. The third big takeaway for me on that chapter was the section on assessing performance ability. So again, I learned something here that I didn't know, and the section about giving problem-solving approaches to actors or performers when they were struggling with something was very helpful. Again, I don't know, what I'm doing most of the time, and so I found that to be very helpful to me. Chapter 12 was about casting. Again, I really appreciate this chapter. I knew about emotional qualities, vocal demands, physical qualities. I had never thought about designed audience response. So I never thought about how is the audience going to respond to this person. Maybe I did in a way, because when I'm watching them audition, I'm responding to them, right? I'm the audience. So maybe I did think of it and I just didn't realize what I was doing. So I found that very helpful. The second takeaway from that chapter was about cooperativeness and talent. I totally agree that a performer with a good attitude about working in theater may be a better choice than one more talent but less cooperative attitude. Completely. And so that is like what I look for when I'm looking at my performers. If they have a negative attitude or they treat others badly, they're not going to be cast, at least not in a major role. My third takeaway for this chapter was about open casting, casting people from diverse backgrounds into non-traditional roles. So I thought that was very cool, and I love that because sometimes I don't know what is okay, what is not okay. And this year, especially, I only have like one boy, so I needed some boy characters to be filled, and I had two girls that were willing to do that for me. So I find that to be just very helpful for me as a new director. And then the last chapter was chapter 13 about rehearsals. Again, very helpful for me. Last year was my first play. I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, we're going to start in January because our performance is in May, and I don't know what this is going to be like. So it wasn't bad, but this year will definitely be better because this year I am planning my rehearsals, and I didn't do that last year. So my first takeaway from this chapter was about estimate the length of rehearsal period. I found that information, the rule of thumb, about an hour of rehearsal for every 1 minute of performance, to be very wow. Like, I was shocked to learn that, but helpful. And then the other section I found extremely helpful was structuring the rehearsal schedule, and how the author broke down each week, the 5 weeks before performance, and what we should be working on during that time. I also felt that very helpful. It's really hard in my position. I only have the kids for about an hour and a half, but I have to give them snack time. So about an hour each time we meet. And so that is one reason why we start in January. And then it's after school. So I meet with them twice a week for about an hour. So it's not a lot, but I feel like at least this chapter gave me like, okay, this is what it should look like, and here's what I'm doing. And then the third takeaway for me was about memorization. This is something that's very, it's very interesting because half of my students learn their lines right away. Some of them before I even ask them to, they have them memorized, and the other ones are just taking their sweet time. And so that's something I really struggle with in middle school, is how do I get them to learn their lines and be off book when it's time to be off book. So overall, this chapter was very helpful about rehearsal. Overall, all the readings this week were super helpful for me as a brand new director, not knowing what I'm doing most of the time. So I really appreciated all of it. Thanks, guys. Have a good week.